The Innovator's Dilemma. In 2006, Steve Jobs walked onto a dark stage at the Macworld conference, dressed in his usual blue jeans and black turtleneck. The crowd was full of excited tech fans. Suddenly, blue smoke appeared on one side of the stage. A man in a white bunny suit, the kind of worn in clean rooms at chip factories, walked out. He came up to Jobs, took off his head covering and smiled. It was Paul Otellini, the CEO of Intel. He gave Jobs a big silicon wafer and said, "Steve, I want to report that Intel is ready." This drastic moment was typical of Steve Jobs' presentation, but it was almost also a major win for Intel. By then, Intel already made the chips for most personal computers. They had beaten their only big rival, AMD, by sticking with the x86 instruction set, the basic language that PC chips use. But Apple didn't use x86 chips. That was about to change. Jobs and Otellini announced that Apple's Mac computers would now use Intel chips. This gave Intel even more control over the PC market. Steve Jobs was already a tech legend. He had invented the Macintosh computer and made computers simple and easy to use. In 2001, Apple launched the iPod, showing how digital tech could change any device. Paul Otellini, on the other hand, was very different. Unlike Intel's earlier CEOs who were engineers and scientists, Otellini had a background in economics and held an MBA. He wasn't a tech visionary, he was a manager. As Intel CEO, he focused on keeping profits high by protecting Intel's powerful position in the x86 chip market. Slowly, Intel's culture changed. Employees noticed that executives started wearing more formal clothes like white shirts and ties. The company was moving from engineers to business managers. The x86 system wasn't the best chip design. It just became the standard because IBM used it in their first PCs. Intel got lucky, but they also had strong leadership, and Andy Grove, a former Intel CEO, used to describe Intel business like a castle with a moat. The castle was their profits and the moat protecting was the x86 system. Intel built the empire on that moat. Meanwhile, at the University of California, Berkeley, engineers developed better kind of chip design called RISC. These chips were simpler, used less power, and were more efficient than x86 chips. In the 1990s, Grove thought about switching Intel to RISC, but it was too risky. Engineers in the tech world was built around x86. Everything in the tech world was built around x86, and changing could weaken Intel's control over the market. So Intel stuck with x86, and most PCs still use it today. Intel also took over the server market, the big computers that run websites, cloud storage, and business software. In the early 2000s, companies like IBM and HP sold most of the server chips, but Intel used its powerful chip designs and manufacturing ability to grab more of this market. As cloud computing grew with server services like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud, Intel's chips became the standard there too. By the mid 2000s, Intel nearly owned the server chip market, competing only with AMD. Today, almost all data centers use x86 chips from either Intel or AMD. The internet cloud depends on these processors. Some companies did try to challenge x86. In 1990, Apple and two partners started a company called ARM in Cambridge, England. ARM aimed to create new chips based on the RISC system, the one Intel had rejected. Since ARM was brand new and had no existing business, it could start fresh without worrying about switching from x86. ARM wanted to replace x86 at the center of computing. Its first CEO, Robin Saxby, had big dreams. He told his tiny 12% team, "We have got to the global standard. That's the only chance we have got." Robin Saxby, ARM's first CEO, had worked at Motorola and then at failed European chip startup. That experience taught him a key lesson: don't rely on making your own chips. Silicon is like steel, he said. It's just a commodity. We should never build chips ourselves. Instead, ARM followed a different path. They would sell licenses for others to use their chips designs and let outside companies manufacture the chips, companies like TSMC. Intel, on the other hand, controlled everything. From designing chips to manufacturing them, Saxby wanted to break that model. He wanted smaller chips companies called fabless firms. to use ARM's designs, customize them, and let foundries like TSMC handle production. Saxby didn't just want to compete with Intel, he wanted to change how the whole chip industry worked. But in the 1990s and 2000, ARM couldn't compete in the PC market. Intel and Microsoft had too strong a partnership, and Windows didn't work well with anything other than Intel's x86 chips. But ARM's chips design had one big strength: it used less power, which made it perfect for small battery-powered devices. Nintendo used ARM chips for its handheld consoles, a tiny market that Intel ignored. Intel was too focused on big money from PC chips to bother with small devices. This was a big mistake. Intel didn't realize until too late that another niche market was about to explode: the mobile phone market. People had predicted for decades that mobile devices would eventually replace PCs. Carroll made a professor at said this in the 1970s. Even Intel had worked on futuristic products in the 1990s and 2000s, like a video conferencing system similar to Zoom. But this project didn't make much money, so they were abandoned. Intel stuck with what was profitable: PC chips. Inside Intel, people talk about mobile devices even in the early 1990s. One executive even waved a Palm Pilot, an early smart device, and said, "This will replace PCs some days." But since PCs were making so much money, investing in mobile seemed risky. Intel kept waiting and waited too long. This situation is a perfect example of the innovator's dilemma, a theory by Howard Professor Clayton Christensen. Christensen had even advised Intel CEO Andy Grove. Everyone at Intel knew the theory. Successful companies often fail to innovate because their current business is too profitable to risk. In the 1980s, Grove had made bold decision to save Intel, but by the 1990s and 2000, Intel was so profitable that there was no urgent reason to change. It owned two major markets, PC and server chips, and both were protected by the x86 system like a moat around the castle. Then came a big moment. After Apple put Intel chips in its Macs, Steve Jobs asked Intel to make chips for a new product, the iPhone. Apple wanted a powerful processor that worked like a computer chip but also fit in an iPhone. Intel said no. Ottolini, Intel CEO at the time, explained later that Apple wouldn't pay the price Intel wanted. He didn't think Apple's iPhone would sell in large number. He was very wrong. So Apple turned to ARM. ARM's chip design were perfect for mobile phone because they used less power. Samsung built Apple's early iPhone chips using ARM's design. Intel missed the chance, and the iPhone became one of the best-selling products in history. By the time Intel realized what it had lost, it was too late. Apple had already become a giant in the smartphone world. Intel tried to catch up, spending millions on mobile chip development, but it never succeeded. Apple had already built a strong, profitable lead. Intel had lost the advantage of being first, and spending big money just to be in second place didn't seem worth it. A few years after turning down the iPhone deal, Apple was making more money from phones than Intel was from PC chips. Mobile phones now account for about one-third of the all chips sold, and Intel still hasn't been able to break into that market. So why did Intel miss so many chances after Grove retired? Since the late 1980s, Intel has made over $250 billion in profit. That's a record few companies can match. It earned so much by charging high prices for its PC and server chips. These high prices were possible because of the advanced technology and smart design Grove had set up years before. But this success came with a cost. Intel became too focused on keeping profit margins high. Managers wanted to protect earnings instead of trying new ideas. Risky, low-margin projects were avoided even if they had big future potential. This mindset influenced everything at Intel: who they hired, what products they built, and how they did research. Leaders were more focused on balance sheets than on building better chips. As one former Intel executive said, Intel had the right technology and smart people, but it didn't want to take a hit on profit margins.